And we're back.
Yeah.
Episode 3 of Everyone Belongs podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to show people a way beyond systems into a love that's big enough for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
You're so agreeable.
Not all the time.
And we are kicking off this whole entire podcast thing for Everyone Belongs by telling our story. If you're new here, welcome. You're fine hopping in, but just keep in mind that you're jumping straight to episode 3 of our story. And the reason why we are starting with our story is because we have been doing this vlogging, podcasting thing for a while now, about 4 years of vlogging. And over the years, people have asked us to share our story. And it didn't really feel appropriate on our other channel, which is called Fight for Together, which I imagine a lot of people are here because of Fight for Together. So shout out Fight for Together fans.
Whoop, whoop.
And finally, we're like, we need to put this someplace, so we need to start this other channel. And second of all, I think it is maybe the best way to share with people where we're coming from, although the plan very quickly is to move past our story and to actually begin to talk about topics and themes in a bit more of an organized and hopefully helpful manner to people. But I've been pleasantly surprised at the feedback we've gotten so far.
Yeah, I know. I'm always just surprised by how many people resonate with our story and take the time to listen.
When we last left off, we left 25-year-old Ben and Cammie in Seattle, Washington, technically Kirkland. Home of Kirkland Signature, by the way, if you're a Costco fan, which we are, because Costco's amazing, and it's from our hometown, Kirkland, Washington.
5 of our kids were born in Kirkland, Washington.
Does that make them Kirkland Signature kids?
High quality.
Low price. Okay, so we ended off in Seattle, Washington, talking about me starting a blackjack team, which was a big departure from our original plan to become missionaries in Africa. But one thing led to another. It really did. And we found ourselves there going to a Presbyterian church on Capitol Hill in Seattle. And I really liked it.
Yeah, I did too.
We were friends with the pastor, the new pastor, because the old one had the sex scandal, if you remember. Friends with the elders. I don't know of like a person I didn't like.
Everyone was super friendly. It was super artsy. I know we say this a lot. Cutting edge last time, but type of church that, at least from where we came from.
The music was.
Yeah.
The service was, very traditional in that it was liturgical, and we had never done anything like that.
Yeah, maybe that was cutting edge for us because we had never done anything like
cutting
that.
Cutting edge, new old school liturgy.
Yeah. Yeah. But I have good, fond memories.
Very much so.
Of that time.
And then the cliffhanger we left you on last week was the discipleship process from hell, is what I think I called it, which is an exaggeration.
It's an exaggeration. It's a reaction.
But we're not even going to get to why we're reacting. Let's just tell a story.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. So we were going to this church, and then in 2007, we hear that my brother, if you remember, he was kind of a mentor, really to both Ben and I, but he was my brother. type figure in our lives, and we heard that he was doing a discipleship program
Process is what he called
and
it, I
he
think.
lived out in Kentucky with his family, and actually my whole family lived out there. My parents and my sister were out there at that point, and you heard about it, and
He told me about it.
right, he told you about it.
He said, like, this is brand new. I think it was 9 weeks long at the time. And
9 weeks long to go through, right?
Yes.
That's what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, 1 day a week. It takes 9 weeks to go through. It's like life-changing. It's changing people's lives. It works. And I'd never heard of anything like it.
Yeah, it felt like the next step for us.
We had done,
where
like,
we were at.
We had done like workbooks.
Yeah.
Like we went through that Sonship Harvest Ministries book that you got that tattoo on your arm.
Yeah, I have a tattoo of a cross that's giving birth to a heart.
We had done like books and really kind of tapped out in everything we thought we could do at church. I mean, there's only so many services.
Yeah, and we felt always, I don't know how, we were overachievers when it came to like our faith. It's like, okay, what's the next thing? Like, let's do it. Let's climb, whatever. So this felt like the next thing. And I just have a memory of you being like really pumped about it. And I was like, okay. And that's kind of how I was back then, where I was just like, okay.
Which that was about a 18-year span of our marriage.
Yeah, where
about
I just
everything.
couldn't really tap into my own preferences and opinions, and kind of just followed whatever Ben was into for the most part. Although I was into Smallville and you weren't into that. So there were things.
And Grey's Anatomy.
That I was, and Grey's Anatomy. Yeah,
and I think people were mentioning in the comments of the last episode, like, oh, we want to hear from Cammie more. And I was thinking, well, first of all, I have more of a passion for telling the story. So, sorry.
I'll
but
try.
You're going to hear from me more.
You're going to hear from Ben more, but I'll try to step it up as much as I can.
Second of all, a lot of those years for you, I think, were like I led and you followed. And we're not even talking like spiritual leadership.
Although that was part of it too. But yeah.
Very small percentage. I think a lot of it was just personality and your lack of maturity or development from both of us.
Right.
But you didn't. It was hard to get any opinions from you out of anything. Like you were just like you just went along with the flow, whatever the flow was.
Yeah, that part of me just did not get developed when I was a kid. And so when I got married, it still wasn't developed. So it took a long time.
So the one thing I wanted to say about the Presbyterian Church before we talk about our trip out to Kentucky is that we had gone now for, I think, maybe a year, 2 or 3. I don't remember exactly where we're at. But but if you would have asked me, are you happy with this church experience? I would have said yes. But here's the caveat. As long as I didn't think about it too hard. Because it was like fine, like we had kids. It's kind of like...
It's like when you're just coasting.
Like punk rockers, you can only be punk rock so long and then you eventually sell out. But you still have that like longing for punk rock inside of you. Like I had dedicated my life to missions and serving God and going to Africa. And then we're going to church on Sunday.
It's felt like a neutered version of that.
And everyone is like pretty happy and like content. And I'm like, you guys, like there's more to life. Like we should be moving in with each other and selling all our stuff for the poor and, going to third world countries and, confessing crazy things and having our life be truly transformed. And I never got that. But as long as I didn't think about it, I was like, oh, well, this is okay. This is fine. Like maybe I should just settle and like but it kind of in the back of my mind, it always felt like selling out a bit. So then comes this opportunity to go on this discipleship program. And we had never heard of anything like this. I mean, I had heard of stuff like YWAM or Campus Crusade, or I don't know what those other ministries are, but those are more for like pre-married folks. So basically, from the time we heard of it, I think we instantly started planning on going through it, which basically meant moving our entire family out by driving an RV from Seattle to Kentucky. Is it 3,000 miles? 2,000 miles? I don't even know.
Probably close.
And with Memory was a baby.
Memory was a year old.
So we had 4 kids.
Yeah. Dove was 6. Oh, we pulled her. Well, she'd finished kindergarten, and then we basically pulled her out of first grade before she started first grade.
Because we left in September.
So we knew we were going to take a couple months off for her with that, and then we're just going to plan on putting her back in there when we got home.
So this was like, for us, this was par for the course. But when I talk to other people, this type of lifestyle seems like really extreme, where you pull your kid from school, you leave your mortgage, you leave your home, and you go to, we went to go stay with a family.
That I guess we knew a little bit.
I think we had met once.
Yeah, we knew it a little bit, yeah.
And our family had like 2 bedrooms.
And they had 2 little kids as well.
So we're staying with a family with 2 families, 6 kids total, in a total of 4 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms. I don't even know.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Across the country in the Midwest.
Right.
All to go through this discipleship program.
Yep.
And this program, it was 10 weeks long. There was a moment, because the way this program is structured, there's like week 4 was Lordship. And Jeremy had already given me this talk in
high school.
So it wasn't like a shocker to me when it came.
Yeah.
But I love these type of talks. The Lordship talk, where it's like,
extreme.
Are you willing to give up everything to follow Jesus Christ as your Lord? And back then, I always thought the nature of it is there's always more to give up. Like something's going to sneak back in. And I want to give up everything. I want to be like balls out, sold out, 200%. So there's like, you go through these, they called them midrashes, but it was basically like a Socratic teaching method where there's like not really lectures, but like asking questions and getting people to arrive at certain conclusions. And then you go for a walk in the park. And that was the moment for me, the only moment I really remember. And I felt like I saw the moon. I was at this baseball field, and I was asking God, is there anything for me to give up? And I felt like instead of having a bunch of bad things to give up, I was supposed to give up who I was, like as a father. And it was a cool moment, and I took it like really seriously. And I was like, I want to have my identity as a father be defined by who God is and not anything else.
Yeah, and for me, so they had a week, maybe it was the 5th week, they talked about the Holy Spirit, which was pretty actually life-changing for me during that time. Because I grew up not really talking about the Holy Spirit. We didn't grow up Pentecostal or, charismatic at all. So the Holy Spirit was pretty much like ignored. So then I felt like I was learning something new about Christianity for the first time. And it made me feel way more alive, I remember. And I remember going home after this and like practicing listening to God and generally feeling like I was hearing God for the first time in my life. And so I remember it feeling really empowering to me. That God wasn't just this, like, I don't know, silent deity. So I guess what I'm saying is there were some good things here. I'm trying to like reach, but
Well, it felt good at the time.
Yeah.
And I got a huge leg tattoo. That was a huge part of the
right.
trip. Like this huge dandelion scene.
Yeah.
On my leg was from. I don't want to get into it.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did come back, and what this discipleship process did, the whole point of it was designed to be replicatable. And that's what was so appealing about it to us was now church was so like boring to us, but now we had this track. It was like being in the talented and gifted program at school where you could like study at your own pace. So now, or tag for those of you that were in talented and gifted of my brand. But so now we go home and we're on a fucking mission. I mean, it's like, okay, we need to start an SFL. That was what it was called The Story from Life. Did we say this already? So
Yeah.
the idea very simply was it was called The Story from Life. Did we get tattoos yet? No, we got them later.
Yeah.
And the idea was, okay, these 9 or 10 weeks take you through, quote unquote, the story of the Bible.
Yeah.
Starting with creation, ending with recreation, or basically heaven. And there's like somewhat randomly chosen weeks in between. And I only say random because now I see them as random, but at the time it was like, oh, each of these is super important. But it was, and the idea is if we reshape our understanding of the story, we change our whole life. The meta story that we believe. So we came back just on
And become
fire.
super Christians.
We came back on fire thinking we have to share this with as many people as possible
Yeah.
to help them have story-formed lives. Lives
Right.
that are shaped by the ultimate and only true story.
Right.
So lucky for us, we had some friends, like our best friends and business partners, Colin and Grace, who we had met at Bible camp, who I had started the blackjack team with and worked together for a lot of years. And
They became like our partners in that.
and
too.
they had bought a house like 3
Blocks
blocks away, mostly for the blackjack team and like community living stuff. And they were like all about it too, except for like I don't think they could really afford or weren't as passionate about going to Kentucky. But the idea was we're going to come back and we're going to take them through it. And then we started inviting neighbors and I mean, you name it.
I like invited my old friend from high school, and I remember she was like, thanks, but I'm not in the same place as I used to be, and I don't really believe this stuff anymore. Because I remember she was raised Christian. So it was sort of just like, oh, man.
So then an interesting thing happened is we were still at the Presbyterian church and we were still happy there.
Right.
We're like, to us, it wasn't mutually exclusive, but we could tell that the pastor did not like what we were doing.
Yeah. Which is weird because his wife was trying to get me to invite some of her friends. She's like, oh, this would be really good for this person.
Well, I think to a certain point they thought it was cool,
Yeah.
but I think our talk started to get we're getting a little too big for our britches. And they were starting to see that this thing wasn't just like a little side project of ours. It was like cutting into the pie a little bit.
Well, we were the type of people that we went like 110%. So we couldn't just do a side project with it. Like we saw it as like, no, this is...
Which is probably why we were drawn to it.
Yeah.
So now context here, I don't think we shared this, but we were members of the Presbyterian church.
Right.
So membership was a big deal there. And it had never been emphasized for us really anywhere else. Like all the non-denominational churches, it was super cash. But there was like all these documents. Like we went through these, I forget what they were called, but basically like introduction classes. And then we had to like sign these documents that were like really formal. And back then it was like really refreshing to us. It was like, oh, this is cool. It's like, we're finally committing to this club and they're committing to us. And here's the expectations. And it was all like pretty clear.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't wish-washy. And all I remember is we had a series of meetings with the pastor where he was kind of like asking us what we thought about this discipleship stuff. And he was kind of encouraging us to choose either that or the church. And we thought about it, and we actually called Jeremy on the phone and talked to him about it because he was still a mentor at this time, more than ever, actually, because now he's mentoring us, not just us, but he's actually mentoring us on how to mentor other people with the Story Form Life business, which he had created from scratch, basically. So, you know, we're on the phone like all the time now. And we're meeting with these leaders at the church, and specifically the pastor, like he didn't really like it. And he kept on telling us like, maybe we should choose. And he's like kind of doing these like soft sell suggestions. And a few of the meetings got a little heated, but I was like, well, whatever, like we're committed to both. Like, so, and then I think we stopped going to the Presbyterian church for a little bit, which is no big deal. People stop going all the time. And then we got a letter in the mail. And I've recently searched this letter, but I can't find it. I had it up until fairly recently, but it was revoking our membership. But it was like, so this is the first real time, I think, we ever got kicked out of a church, but it wasn't kicked out. It was like, it was almost, you know how they're like saying like, you should resign so we don't have to fire you. This was like, we accept your resignation, but we never resign.
Right.
And it was like, it was one of the first moments where I really started to wonder about church, you know, and this is a little bit late in the game for me. Like a lot of our friends that we went to, you know, camp, training, Christian living in our high school years, a lot of people had bailed on church because it was hard or difficult. And I was like, I don't mind hard or difficult. Like that wasn't an issue with me. But I just remember thinking, okay, the Presbyterian church, like that's supposed to be like super legit. Like they're organized. It's not wishy-washy. There's membership documents. It's like there's contracts. It's all in writing. There's like all this accountability and oversight. And they quote like fucking how historically secure and, you know, unmodern it is because of how tried and true history and tradition is. All the, you know, they educate you about all this stuff. And then I saw, oh, the head pastor gets what the head pastor wants, no matter what the documents say. That's when I realized that.
Yeah.
And I was like, it was a little bit disillusioning for me. Because this is the head pastor that we had gone to casinos with, gone on family vacations with. But now I can see that what we believed and who we were was actually threatening.
Yeah. I remember feeling pretty hurt by that. But, I mean, time has gone on. But it's just funny now. I'm like, well, he could have done a lot worse than he did now that we've been through what we've been through.
Yeah, it was totally chill. Like, it was just
it was, I mean, I do wish they could have been a little more upfront about it, but...
What do the kids say nowadays? It's like low-key. It was a low-key back off in blackjack language.
Yeah, they didn't, like, humiliate us or shun us.
But still, I can't emphasize enough. 1 second, we're going on family vacations. You're going to mom's group, and you're in the top. We're in, like, leadership. And the next second, we're, like, out.
Right.
And it really wasn't overnight like that, but but we had like committed for years and years to this place.
Yeah, it was weird how quickly things just shifted.
And then the next thing I'll say is we didn't go to the church for a while because we were kind of like hurt and it was weird. So, but 2 years later we go back and the church wasn't big. It was like maybe 100 people, maybe 200. And, you know, like I said, we had done all this like cooking and our family, you know, it was a young church. So like we were like some of the only people with kids there even at the time. And we go back 2 years later and people are like, oh, we haven't seen you. You've been going to the second service? And we're like, no. And that's when I also saw you can be super essential to a place or feel super essential,
But
and you don't show up, no one's going to miss you.
yeah,
You are not as important as you think you are.
Disposable.
That's what I learned.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So the next thing, this is a bit of a side tangent, but it's actually a really important one for me, is I started going to Sexaholics Anonymous kind of on a whim. And I say a whim because my cousin invited me to a meeting. We were like at a Bible camp, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Oh, I'm taking an inventory of resentment so I can apologize to my dad or something." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "Who does that?" I was like, "Where'd you learn how to do that?" And he was like, "Oh, it's a 12-step group." I said, "What's a 12-step group?" And he said, "Well, it's a group that helps you like work through the 12 steps like on the basis of an addiction." And I was like, okay, and I've never heard of any of that stuff. But he was like, "Do you want to come to a meeting? There's one tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. And I was like, great. I don't have anything tomorrow at 6 a.m. Like, let's go. Then I found out it was for Sexaholics. So I was like, well, that's kind of weird, but, I don't care. I'll still go. So I went, and in the first meeting or two, the way these people were talking and sharing, I'd never seen anything like it. Mm-hmm. And I could identify right away with the types of stuff they were sharing. I'll never forget this one share I heard. This guy said like, "Oh, I was like stressed out from work or some conflict." I forget what he said exactly, but he said, "And then I wanted to go and medicate myself from the pain, and I wanted to act out." And the way he said like medicate myself from the pain and act out, he didn't say exactly what he does normally or what he did, but I was like, oh, all these things that I do, they have a reason. And I had never been raised to address the reason. It was just like, oh, you're angry? Stop. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're stealing something? Stop it. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're watching too much TV or doing drugs or looking at porn or masturbating or eating too much? Stop it. Mm-hmm. Pray it away. Ask God to help you and fix it. Don't like ever think about what's actually causing it. And so I was like instantly drawn to this group. Mm-hmm. And what happened over the next number of years was I went back, and I kept on going back. Mm-hmm. And, I identified, it took me a lot of years, but I eventually did identify as a sex addict, which would mean when I shared, I said, "Hi, my name's Ben, I'm a sexaholic." Which sounds weird to some people because I had a girlfriend in high school, and we kissed. I never touched her boobs. I had never touched another woman, or even really, I don't want to say I'd never thought about it, but I'd never seriously been in a situation where I could. Mm-hmm. I had looked at porn and masturbated, and I always felt crazy guilty afterwards, even through our marriage at that time. So that was the thing where I was like, okay, I can talk about this because I wish I didn't do this, and I didn't want to do it, and I felt bad about it. Mm-hmm. So I'm fine with calling myself a sexaholic because I look at porn and masturbate, and we weren't okay with that at the time.
Yeah.
But this was really fascinating to me because this came along at a time when we lost our other church community. Mm-hmm. And I was blown away because it was at 12-step groups that I experienced so many things that I had heard about in church, but never actually seen in church. Things like vulnerability, things like legit honesty, things like confession, things like, I don't know, what you would call like actual like brotherly love. The types of people at 12-step groups, I got the vibe and feeling. I mean, you'd have some dude show up that would literally take the bus to get there, and some other guy would show up that was like a lawyer and drove a BMW to get there. And when you walked through the doors, you were 100% equals. The way that the program is structured, the sharing and whatnot, the one guy didn't have more power which at the church, it actually was that way. Like if you were to be an elder, the elders generally had money. Not always. And they were generally well-dressed.
And they had lives that, at least on the outside, looked orderly. looked put together.
Yes.
But here there wasn't any hierarchical system. In fact, there was systems in place to make sure that didn't happen.
Yeah. Which, come to find out, there was another hierarchy at place, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't typical.
Hmm.
It wasn't like a corporation. And
Yeah.
so
I went to what's called S-Anon, which is like supposed to be the, I guess, spouse or partner of the person who's in SA. And I think I went for, I don't know, maybe it was a few months after you started going. You kind of were encouraging me, and I went for probably a good year or so, and I had a sponsor, which kind of it was actually a really cool time for me. I think I learned some really good things back then, and it was the kind of thing where I learned it and it didn't sink in until like years later. But one of the things was just focus on yourself. Don't try to change the other person. And really what that did for me was it taught me how to be more introspective and stop deflecting from yourself so that you don't have to look at yourself and deflecting by looking at someone else, which the easiest person to look at if you're married is your partner, your spouse. That was really good for me, because I also think it was easy for me to see you as the one with all the problems, especially our stance on porn back then was like, oh yeah, well, Ben's the one, and what kind of problems do I have? Like, it was actually, I had what they called sponsors. So I met with this lady for about a year.
who was not a Christian.
Oh yeah, I guess she wasn't.
Which that would have been a really big no-no for where we came from.
Yeah, and which it wasn't a no-no to me, but I definitely had this like, oh well, I need to witness to her like mentality that we just had back then. Pressure on me, like, so I remember trying to get her to come to Story from Life. It never happened, but yeah, she was like this older woman, and in a way, her not being a Christian was, looking back, was kind of refreshing. I didn't know it at the time, but I could see now that she treated me less of a project than any other older woman who was a Christian would have treated me. Like, I kind of felt like she was like helping me, but there was less of a like, oh, I need to fix you kind of mentality, I felt. Anyways. Yeah. Come to find out. No.
So what I really learned in 12-step groups, I mean, I actually learned a ton. Like, I don't want to sell this short, because, I mean, it was like my eyes would be open every single week. After every meeting, I would just come home and be so excited to talk to Cammie, especially like family of origin stuff. And like I said, the Christian background that we came from, there's a ton of emphasis on the idealism of being regenerated and born again and joyful and love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. We talked about all those things as if they were current realities. And what that led to was all the things that didn't quite match up to that, we confess them in broad generalities. We say these things like, oh, nobody's perfect, or like, even I have stuff, But basically, we didn't address those areas of our life with honesty or scrutiny. And I'm not even talking about scrutiny like, oh, pick it apart and like talk about what a dipshit you are. I'm just saying actually talking about these things like in a completely unloaded environment where it's just like we can just be honest and be like, oh yeah, I do that. And someone else can be like, oh, I do that too. Isn't that kind of funny? Or like, I wonder where that comes from. Or can we see patterns from this thing? Or, what causes this? And that's what I was able to do in 12-step groups. And And it was so cool because all these areas that I had never talked about, some of which were sexual in nature for me, but a lot were not. A lot were just, I remember in our fight, we had this dynamic where you would reject me for having sex and I would pull away. And we would go into this 2 or 3, oftentimes 1, 2, 3 day kind of spiral of withdrawal where I didn't want to be touched and I didn't want to talk to you, and you would get desperate and come chase after me. And then we would have awesome makeup sex and then like go another week or 2 or 3 and then do the same thing over again. And I felt like we were crazy for doing that. And then I learned, oh, that's just another way of coping with problems. And there's like a lot of people that do that and some people use other ways, but everyone has these problems. And I was like, I didn't feel like a monster anymore.
Yeah.
So there, I came to terms with, there's this phrase that you lead with your weakness. And like I said, I had always heard that in church. Like, in fact, there's this guy that's famous for talking about something like that. I think his name was like Jesus. People said that, like, oh, Jesus did this. But the leaders of the church, including ourselves, were always the ones that were the most morally adept and put together, not the one who seemed to need Jesus' help the most. And what I saw at 12-step groups when I got a sponsor, who was also a bus driver, his name was William, and he became a close friend of ours over the years. He was actually being more honest than anyone, it felt like. And he seemed like he needed help more from the program than anyone else, the longer he had been there. And I was always like, aren't you doing it backwards? Like, shouldn't you need it less? Because everyone at church, like, the more you were there, the less you felt like you actually needed church and the more you helped others.
Right.
But, I don't know.
You're like, something's not working here if you're...
So my biggest accomplishment through 12-step groups was getting free of secrets. I had the sexual secrets. In blackjack, I had stolen money, at least once? One major big time, where money had been stolen from my car. And instead of reporting it to the team and taking responsibility for it, I reported it as a loss, which means I didn't have to pay I think it was like $8,000 or $11,000. I'm not sure exactly what. But these were things that had happened in years past, and I had sworn, against stuff from my childhood, I had sworn this stuff didn't happen and it'll never see the light of day. And it can't help anyone. I'm never going to talk about it ever again. I'm just going to pretend it doesn't exist. And through 12-step groups, I actually worked through those things to a point where I was willing to share it all with myself, first of all, with a group of people, with you, and eventually put on the fucking internet. I've read the entire thing on our vlog of like all this sexual everything.
The quintessential overshare.
Yeah, seriously. It's like 40 minutes long. And we talk about every single thing I've ever done. I mean, literally. I don't think we left anything out. That video is now private because I think it can be like that type of information can be abused too much in this culture with people that are not willing to look at context or not interested in context. But I still don't mind sharing it at all. Like, I'll read it to anyone. Like, it doesn't. That type of those activities don't have any power in my life anymore.
Yeah.
Which was a huge step forward from where we had come from. So I tell people that the 12-step group, it saved my life. And it was the church, it functioned as the church for us in that time that we didn't have anything.
And it was the closest that we ever really got to what the church maybe should be.
Okay, so jumping back to Story Farm Life. So we are going to 12-step groups, and we are now super on mission still to lead this thing and train people in it and do it as many times as we can. So we always have one going. We finish 10 weeks. We take a break for a week or two, and then we start another one. And in this time period, I invited a guy from 12-step groups that started going through it. He ended up moving into our house. We had another family with 2 kids move into our house because they were going through it. We had another single guy who was my personal assistant at the time move into our house. So at this time we have, shit, is this for real? How many kids did we have at the time?
4.
So there's 6 of us, 7, 8, 12 people living in our house. All mostly because of Story Farm Life.
Yeah.
And then once again, business tangent, but I feel like it's going to come up later, so I got to bring it up now. I was in the right place at the right time and started talking with some of these friends, primarily Jeremy, Cammy's brother, who had started the Story Farm Life. He talked to me about this business idea that he had, and he was in this conversation with this guy named John in Portland. And John had played on my blackjack team, and we had all gone to youth group together. And Jeremy had this friend named Steven who had started the Story Farm Life. So there's 4 of us, and we start this internet web company called Epifio. And the long and the short of Epifio was for 4 months or so, it didn't make a dime. And then we made a video that got picked up by Google. And then we had more money than we knew what to do with for a very long time, to the tune of like very quickly on, we're making like $1 million. Our family's making $1 million a year. So I guess that is important because not only because
tangent.
Well, we go from like wanting to be broke ass missionaries, not registering for wedding gifts because we don't want any material objects and sleeping on a fucking futon, to making $1 million a year.
Yeah.
I mean, it was torture and it was super fun all at the same time.
We didn't really know how to handle it. I mean, I don't know if anyone really does. I mean, I guess maybe people learn how to handle.
Oh, I could have multiple episodes just dedicated to dumb decisions I made with money.
I mean, if you think about it, we were in our late 20s and we had $1 million coming in every year for like at least 3 or 4 years, right? Something like that. And
here's the fascinating thing, I think, is that even though we were 20, I mean, they talk about how
late 20s
inept people are with money. You know, like they don't teach you about mortgages or credit card rates and things.
Yeah.
And I was like really advanced because my mind naturally gravitated towards money, and
thinking about it,
and I thought about it in blackjack nonstop. Mm-hmm. But still, when we made the $1 million, I felt like I had really been thinking about money for like 2 years, 3 years, 4 years maybe. And I was 25, 26, 27, 28, I don't remember. But my point is, for 2 or 3 or 4 years out of 25 is nothing. I mean, imagine like being 25 and being exposed to math for the first time. That's how I felt like. In regards to the moral issues, our training with money in the church boiled down to A, don't have it, even though people did. But the technical teaching was like, it'll ruin you.
Right.
2, give us 10 or 15%. And don't buy flashy shit. And they didn't say that, but that was pretty much.
Or if you do buy flashy shit, hide it. Don't flaunt it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That makes it not flashy at that point. You can still buy nice shit, but just don't, like, the people at churches we went to, it wasn't cool to have a Rolex or a Lamborghini. Like, you could have a nice TV and you could have really nice things, but you weren't buying, like, the Louis Vuitton stuff. You weren't flexing.
Right.
So you go with that mindset of don't have it, give 10 or 15%, and then don't flex.
So all of a sudden, if you have it,
now I have $1 million that I have to figure out how to take those 3 simple principles and feel good about my life.
Yeah.
It was a
disaster.
It was a complete disaster.
Yeah. It's not practical at all.
It didn't work for me.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm writing a book, or I've written a book about money and what I learned in that time period, because I felt like now I had been on both sides of the spectrum, from making $10 a day and being happy with that to having $1 million a year and being miserable with that. And people, they make fun of me when I say that I was miserable, but you know, when you believe it's evil to have money and to spend it, and then you have that much of it, it's a tortured existence.
Like a bomb you can't get rid of.
So then we decided to move to Portland.
Oh yeah. Wow. Yeah. 2009 for those date people. Or 2008, I guess, late.
I think they need to know the exact date.
Yeah, I think so. It was October 15th. Anyways. But yeah, there was a family that we knew. Well, we knew Adam from college days. So we'd known them for a long time. Again, we're still on the Story Form Life train. So we're like, hey, maybe we should teach these guys about Story Form Life. They look like they could use it. So they
had gone to Bible college.
Yeah.
With us.
Yeah. That's what I said.
Oh.
Or just Adam, but anyway. So we ended up talking with them, and we were down there with them, and then kind of like talked to them, and then kind of felt like pretty last minute, like we had this conversation. They're like, yeah, okay, you can move in with us. And he was more on board than she was, but we just felt so like, I don't know. We just like, we got to save everyone.
Back then, it was like, if you were willing to listen to us and you had a heartbeat,
yeah,
we would move our entire family
to. We did some crazy shit.
We would restructure our entire life to share the message that we had with you.
Yeah. So we have 4 kids. I think, our youngest memory at the time was probably like 2 or 3, and they had 2 little kids, and they had 3 bedrooms. So that's 10 people in a house, 3 bedrooms in Portland. These are fond memories for me, though, because this was a fun city.
That was awesome.
To live in, with the bike situation. You could bike. The biking was amazing. The food was amazing. The coffee shops were amazing. But yeah, we were on mission, though. We were like trying to.
And I was running the blackjack team, and Epiphia was taking off.
Oh yeah.
So then I was flying down to like Google headquarters, like having these dream meetings.
Yeah.
Flying to San Francisco to meet with Yelp and Facebook and just like the craziest stuff. Just working at coffee shops.
Yeah. Yeah. So
and we're meeting 5 nights a week trying to disciple this family.
Yeah.
And hosting a Story Form Life at their house.
Right.
But that just shows like how far we were willing to go. And actually, foreshadowing, I think how far we were willing to go is actually one of the things I really like about our story. You know, we've always been that way, and we believed that this was the way. So it's like, if it is the way, why wouldn't you go 200% for it?
If you believe that.
And then if it's not, fucking stop faking it and get off the train. But if it is, let's do this thing. Like if what we had was really true, if our treasure is in heaven, if God loves these people that much and they just don't know it, like let's go for it. Like what do we have to lose?
Right.
You know, so that was just our attitude at the time.
Right.
And we were living it. And
we're still that way. It's just like with different things now. And I guess we're not quite that way anymore, though. We've matured, fortunately, I think.
We had a confidence then.
Yeah.
That was like,
our truth should be your truth. Kind of.
Yeah. And it was like, we have something that you need.
Right.
Which gave us that amount of energy to be able to do that, to make those types of decisions.
Yeah.
And I mean, we have 10 minutes. So I wanted to talk about, around this time I discovered Tim Keller, who was a pastor in New York. That I had heard his name a lot at the Presbyterian Church, but I finally read a book by him that was pretty life-changing to me. It was called King's Cross, and this is when I fully started to hear about this message of grace and how much different that was from morality-based living. Tim Keller, like a lot of churches I were raised in, and I'm not telling you what was said, I'm telling you what was taught, reading between the lines. What was taught at most of churches was like, live a good life. Like, don't have sex before marriage, don't do drugs, don't steal, don't murder people, obviously.
Be a nice person.
And what Tim Keller had said that I had never heard before was like, it doesn't matter whether you're good or bad. It more matters like why you're good or bad. Because if you're good for the wrong reasons, you'll create this identity in yourself where you view yourself as a good person and you'll judge people that are bad people. But if you view Jesus as dying for you and everyone, and that the gratefulness from that act of grace or love is what propels you forward, you'll move forward with a lot more energy because it's stemming from gratefulness, not moral responsibility. And you'll have a lot more love and compassion towards others because you're coming from the same place they were. And I wanted to just briefly hit on a few authors that were influential to me up until this point. Like the primary ones probably. In high school, it was probably like C.S. Lewis and Philip Yancey. And I think they taught me that it was okay to use your brain, and that how you think and being able to think is really important, which was valuable for me because I considered myself fairly intellectual. Like I was smart, I had a high IQ, so to just check out that IQ for God or religion didn't work for me. So to see smart people that seem to use the full capacity of their brain within the religion gave me hope. And then the next person that really gave me massive amounts of inspiration through books was Tim Keller. And I think he taught me that what you believe is important, not just what you do. Because a lot of what we had been taught at the church is like what you do is really important. Mm-hmm. Do the right thing.
Yeah.
And he taught me that what you believe actually impacts what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to do a little bit of fast forwarding, which I don't like to do, but we need to get you guys to tune in to the next time. So the person that's probably been the most influential for me for the last 3 years is a guy named Richard Rohr. And I think what he's taught me is that how you see is important, and how you see actually impacts what you believe.
The layers. Yes.
But we got one or two more stories before we leave you on an absolute cliffhanger.
Ooh, yeah.
I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be huge. You're going to have, it'll be like Lost. Fucking hate that show. I hate all artificial cliffhangers. Yeah, you have a life-changing thing that you need to know every 40 minutes.
Ben's like, don't leave me on.
Okay. So then Epifio is taking off like crazy. That's our startup business with these 4 guys, myself included, 4 guys.
You're working like all the time.
Working my nuts off because although I thought money was stupid and a giant distraction from God and the mission field still, I didn't know how to say no to it.
Yeah.
So
because you could use money for God too.
Yeah. I thought God needed my money.
Right.
Because the pastors at church neglected to tell me that when they were asking for their 10 or 15%, they were like, they acted like it was like really important.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know it was just to buy the same shit I was buying.
Right.
I thought it was like to get souls into heaven and to give people Bibles that didn't have Bibles.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, Epifio's taken off like crazy, and two of the founders, Jeremy and Stephen, are based out of Cincinnati area. Technically Northern Kentucky, we call it Cincinnati. So, and this was where we had done the Story from Life. And they had also, so, like, just take a look at this for a second. You have four guys that are all doing church together, life together. One of the guys mentored and discipled the other two guys in youth group. And now they're founding partners of a multi-million-dollar business. I guess some people would look at that and be like, there's going to be a fucking train wreck or disaster going. When I saw this, I was like, this is a match made in heaven. This is wonderful. This is like summer camp meets...
ultimate integration.
Oh my gosh. I was like a dream come true.
Dream turns into nightmare.
So it was, 2012?
That we moved?
Well...
Oh.
You just ruined my story, Cammy. My
cliffhanger. Oh, what are you asking?
What year we came out here to quote-unquote visit?
Well, it's still 2012. Okay. January.
So we came out here to stay for 3 weeks to 4 weeks. And it was in February. And I remember thinking, I'm going to pack a pair of shorts just in case it goes a little bit long. We came out here, and then 2 days later, you could call it the voice of God, or you could call it the dollar signs that we saw. But I come home to Cammie from work, and I said, Cammie, I think we just moved here. We had 3 suitcases. And 5 kids?
This point, yeah. Oh, and I was pregnant with number 6.
Wow.
Yeah.
And instantly we're like, we need to find a place to stay.
Mm-hmm. Because we were just staying at some friend's like little apartment above them for like a month because we thought we were just going to be there for a month.
So it turns out when I was making so much money from Epifio, I bought some properties out here that I had never even seen. And my friend says, you want to see one of your properties? And I'd always said, no, I don't want to see it. And finally he said, well, now do you want to see it? Because we didn't have a place to live. So I went and saw it. And it was this 1-bedroom apartment. And it was terrible. It was gross.
A 3-unit.
It was 3 units. But the unit we were looking at was 1 bedroom.
Yeah.
And it was so terrible that finally I said, we're just going to move in there. So we move into this 1-bedroom place with
5 kids.
5 kids. And we're millionaires.
That's funny.
That is kind of funny.
I never really thought about
totally
that.
It was like camping in a way.
Yeah. It was simple. Really simple. And we stayed there for like 7 months.
And then, maybe this is 2 weeks after being here. This is April 12th, actually, was your birthday. April 11th. We go in for
2 months after being here, yeah.
A meeting that we had with to meet a midwife. And Cammie was 5-6 months along.
Almost 6, yeah.
And
she couldn't find a heartbeat. So it was, our life was just nuts. And I didn't really have, I had 5 little kids, and we just moved across the country and just figured out where we were staying. And looking back, I didn't really have a ton of time to think, how is this pregnancy going? And
I was working.
And you were working a ton. And looking back, I'm like, yeah, I don't remember feeling this baby a whole lot. Being this was my 6th pregnancy, I kind of knew what to feel, but I didn't really think about it. And so we have this meeting, and she can't find a heartbeat. And of course, we're just completely shocked and pretty certain this baby was dead. And I mean, we were just obviously like devastated. And just, our life just came to a screeching halt at that point. Everything that seemed important, like moving there and the business and the work and the money and whatever else, the church, like, didn't matter right then. Like, you stopped working, at least, I mean, temporarily for like, I don't know, a good month, just so that we could grieve. I mean, we didn't know. I guess I didn't tell. So the next day.
We need to end it here. Well,
the next day.
well, let's talk about April 12th, but then we're gonna end it, and that's
so the next day was my 32nd birthday, and we scheduled an appointment, kind of like an emergency appointment, with a doctor to do an ultrasound, just to confirm, yes, your baby is dead. There's no heartbeat. Geesh, yeah, that was like so.
That doctor's appointment was a fucking disaster. The guy's like, starts going on some script and telling us tons of information 2 seconds after he tells us our baby's dead.
Of course, we're not listening to any of it.
Get out of my face.
We're just numb at that point and devastated and heartbroken. And I remember, it was like my fucking birthday. So I just remember we went to Cheesecake Factory, got a slice of cheesecake to split, and just sat there and just stared at it.
Couldn't eat it.
No. So we packed it up and went to a park. And then I think we walked around the park and did eat a little bit of it. But it was just like so
this
crazy.
Is, I mean, Cammie is still pregnant.
Right. Yeah. So we could decide. And this doctor, fortunately, was pretty supportive of whatever decision we wanted to make. If we wanted to go to the hospital and get a DNC or whatever it's called, or get induced to give birth like that, or if we just wanted to do it naturally and just wait it out, and we chose to wait it out.
And this story ends up being, I only knew this in hindsight, but this story ends up being a pretty life-changing moment for our family as we decide on the future of business and family and community. But you have to tune in.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Well, you have to tune in next week too.
Okay.
Which we actually begin recording in about 15 minutes. Lucky for you. You don't have to wait.
We should change clothes just to trick everyone.
Oh, shit. I was supposed to put an ad in here.
Whoops.
Wow.
Oh, who needs money?
Eden will figure it out. All right. Thanks, guys, for listening.
Yeah.
Our podcast is up on iTunes and everything else. We're reading every comment that is made on YouTube. Is the best place to leave a comment. The videos. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I told you this, but we got 5 other ratings. So I think we still might be a 5-star fucking podcast.
People are so kind.
Let me see. I really want to look it up. Everyone.
And you're like, actually, it's 3.
I know. Maybe what if it's bad right now? Well, then I can call our listeners to action and be like, listen, I need you. Oh, we have 6 ratings, and it's 5 stars.
Oh. Okay, stand by it. People are kind.
In fact, there was only one actual written review, but you want to read it? It's really cool.
Sure.
I really like it.
I'll read it.
Actually.
Oh, wait, you want me to read it?
Sure. Well, I really like actually the title and that little line, whatever that is.
Oh. So the title's I Am Not Alone and No Longer Backsliding.
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, you can read the actual review, but we need to sign the heck off of it.
All right. Let me start real quick. Let me start with that. I have a deep faith in Jesus Christ, but quote-unquote Christians have ruined my faith in the church. I am so grateful to have found your podcast via YouTube. It helps me with knowing that I don't have to feel the guilt of quote unquote, backsliding. To know that what I am feeling is not just me is a complete relief. Thank you for openly sharing your life story with all that need to feel like they aren't alone.
You are welcome,
Wow.
and thank you for listening, and thank you for leaving that review.
Yes.
That was cool. I really like that.
Yes.
We'll see you guys next week.
Peace.
Goodbye.